Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar about virtualization of projects. Thanks for joining. So we start with a quick introduction of our two speakers today. So Arpita, please.
Yep, thanks, Ekad. Hello, everyone. This is Arpita Singhal. I'm the partner in the UK business. I come with the background of management consulting. I've led many large-scale ERP transformation programs, business transformation programs, primarily in the industry of life sciences, consumer product, and retail. I have managed projects virtually, semi-virtually during my career. I specialize in procurement, and I'm leading the digital agenda with the RPA and some of the other stuff currently at Tenthpin. As my hobbies, I like reading. As you can see, this is my comfort place at home where I'm normally found. I like traveling, and I'm waiting for things to get better so that I can start traveling again. I play badminton, and these days my favorite activity is doing arts and crafts with my 5-year-old. Thank you for joining the webinar, and over to you, Ekad.
Nice elephant, Arpita.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Eckhard Dräger. I'm a partner in Switzerland with Tenthpin. I've spent almost my entire life in the life science industry, and for the last 20 years, I've been managing in different lead positions major transformation programs. In Tenthpin, I'm specialized mainly in these S4 programs, and I'm also specialist in finance and controlling and master data. So that are my areas of expertise. My hobbies are water skiing in summer, obviously, swimming. Those are summer hobbies which I like very much. And then, and you can see it here, I'm a big cyclist. I like moving. I like traveling around. I like to go to work with my bicycle, and I have 5 bicycles at home in my garage. So my wife finds that a bit annoying, but it's really my hobby, and I like it. And actually, the bike and the travel brings us to the topic of this webinar. So we want to start with a question, and we have a poll prepared for that. So maybe we can start that. So really, the question is if business travel and also commute, right? That depends a bit. If that has become a thing of the past, and in that context, we would like to ask you if you think that it's possible to run a large implementation project, a program like a M&A program or an S4 program, completely virtual. That's a surprising result. So it actually means that for 2/3 of the participants, we actually don't need this webinar, because they all believe large implementation can be done 100% remotely, which is good. So maybe we can, in the Q&A, we can also gather some inputs. But for those 1/3 that think it's impossible, I think for them that will be our challenge to convince you that it can be done and how it can be done. Okay. Oh. Good. Before we go into details, a bit of groundwork. So just that we all have the same understanding what virtualization of projects, what we mean when we talk about virtualization of projects. So basically it's that all members of that project are in different locations. So they're completely separated and they're only connected via electronic technology. And then, as the title suggests, we would like to focus on projects. So not any line management or shared service things, but it's really major projects, and ask if they can be executed remotely. A bit of history I try to give here. I mean, the telephone was invented 1875. That's really long ago, but I guess that was the starting point to virtualize parts of project work. So we've come a long way, and I think it has recently really accelerated. So we will look into that. I think what's important is what are the driving forces behind that. One is definitely cost reduction by saving travel cost. It's access to talent. So if you can source worldwide, that's definitely an advantage. Recently, the last 10 years, I think environmental aspects have come up. And for the individual, I think it's the improved work-life balance that counts. And very recently, you're all aware, we had these travel and contact restrictions from COVID-19. So that was a very recent driving force for the virtualization of projects. So when we prepared this, this seminar, within Tenthpin, we try to look at some facts and baselines. So we've come up here with 4 experiences that we made, which I think give the first direction where things are going. So first of all, we looked into our time clocking that we have in consulting, and we have most of the work is clocked on remote work or on-site project work to distinguish travel expenses and rates and things like that. And the result, I don't think it's surprising, is that over the years, the remote work proportion has grown quite significantly. Then the second one could be industry specifics. We are not so sure. It's not really scientifically proved, because at Tenthpin we do 90% of our revenue with life science clients. So I think that's a bit biased. Nevertheless, what we found is that those 10% non-life science clients, they have a much bigger proportion of remote work, which it could be an indication that maybe life science industry is more conservative, has more funds to run on-site work. That could be indications. Another experience that I have, one of these non-life science clients, it's a company with 30,000 employees worldwide. They are in 1,000 locations, and in their headquarters, they have only 80 people. So if you look at that example, I think it's not surprising that with this setup, they drive basically all projects remotely. They just don't have any other chance, and they don't have a big headquarter that drives projects, for example. Then the third aspect is that it's, even if you look at similar projects, similar project phases, it is very client specific. So we have one US client, which is really like the driving force in running virtual projects, who have done a lot work virtually, whereas others are more conservative and haven't really brought it to that level. So that actually shows that there's in many companies potential to increase the number of the proportion of remote work. And finally, COVID-19, also the jury is still out, I would say, but obviously mid-March, I think all projects had to go 100% remotely. And in the life science industry, most of those projects actually continued. And from what we can see, it's not a final call yet, because many of these projects have still go lives in front of them, but they were actually running quite successfully. And it's not that it was the end of the world, that there was an immediate switch to 100% remote work. Yeah, looking at that, some conceptual ideas, virtualization of project obviously is started on premise. What shouldn't be forgotten when we talk about the topic is the middle part, that I think for decades already we have offshore work, which is an element of virtualization. So you have groups of people that are not directly connected, that work only via electronic media. And I think you can have quite some learnings from that already. I think that's the first chance to learn. And then obviously on the very right-hand side, there's the 100% remote work where everybody works from home. So when we look at that, what are the positive things and the advantages of remote project work? And that is, I think you see here this picture, and I don't think it's realistic. It's definitely not my experience that I can lay down and work in an armchair or sit in the garden or something. Realistically, I haven't really done that. But I think it's a symbol for the personal flexibility that many people enjoy. So that's a personal thing. Also, I hear a lot from people that if they're at home, not in the cubicle, not interrupted, and at work, they get things done. But obviously, that also depends a bit on your personal environment. If you have a dedicated room, if you like, I mean, when we prepared that, Peter had her son running into the conference call. So maybe there are also certain restrictions by individual depending on your personal setup at home. And then there are these advantages that we already mentioned, like costs, pool of experts, and so on. And what I think is quite interesting is that all these positive aspects, they are very tangible. I mean, maybe not so much personal flexibility, but all the rest can easily be measured, and you can clearly see these advantages. when we now look at the disadvantages, there we get like in unclear areas, right? The challenge here is like people will say, okay, how to build trust in such an environment. The quality of communication is not as good as on site. The informal interaction is missing. So all these things, they are difficult to measure. So, and that also means they are difficult to address. Nevertheless, our aim is to address these disadvantages and maybe call it risks in this seminar, to really see how we can overcome these challenges that you see here on the slide, and to make virtual projects more effective and more successful. And here we have another poll. Actually, it's two. So the question to you is, if in your nature of work that you're currently doing, does remote work have personal benefits for you? And then the second question is, can the amount of remote work be increased without jeopardizing your project? So that's your current project experience. Don't spoil it. So while we are waiting for that, what can you expect from the seminar? So that's basically here. So we want to tell you aspects of how to manage a virtual team. So we will look into behavioral aspects. We will look into the technology, what changes in terms of project approach, and then we round it up with a little bit of security, legal, and health and safety aspects. And finally, we also look into limiting factors of virtualization to really understand how that works. So I think we have finished an interesting result. So basically everybody believes that there are benefits, which is good, which is great. I think it mirrors my personal impression. And many think that remote work can be increased on the project, which also reflects a bit what we have seen with our clients recently.
Yep, that's true.
Good. Okay. Having said that, let's look into the behavioral aspects. Here they are. Over to you, Advita.
Yep. So let's think of, what a normal day would look like when I am on a project as a consultant going to a client office. How would I look at the time I spend during the day on different activities? So normally, there will be some direct productive work where I'm focused, doing something, I have to work on this deliverable. So I'm doing my focus work. Then there is also direct productive interactive work where I'm attending meetings, I'm having a discussion with the client, or I'm having an internal debate and we are discussing about something, but that is all productive work, which is interactive. So those are the productive work phases which I would have in a normal day. Then obviously there will be some social interaction. I walk to the coffee corner, meet Eckhart, we have to share something. Oh, there's another thing going on, we need to talk about it. There's another client request which has come up, or I meet one of my client project manager and I have an interaction, or I step out to actually grab a coffee with them. I meet them in the lift. So there is the indirect work contribution, which also happens when you are actually in the workspace and are interacting with your colleagues. There is obviously the travel and commute time. We try to go with an average here. For some people, it might be quite high. Some people, it might be a bit low. But on an average, everybody spends around 1 to 2 hours a day traveling, commuting. Then there is the social interaction bit, where after office hours, we would like to go for a dinner, team building activity, maybe a bowling activity, could be a tennis match. But that is how a normal day would look like when I am on a project. Now, what does it look like when I'm actually remote? So the assumption would be, if I'm working remotely, I do the direct productive work, which is focus, I do my indirect productive work, which is interaction. I'm doing Zoom calls, I'm doing Teams calls. I pick up the phone, call Eckhart, call Gilbert, or any of my colleagues and actually discuss. And rest of the time is my time off. I am spending time with my family. I am actually, baking banana bread, or I'm cooking. I'm doing something which is not work related. That would be a normal assumption when we look at a remote work. But is that the reality? Are we really saying that that is how a productive day looks like? Not necessarily. So if we move to the next slide, then this is how I would say the remote work day looks like. So when I'm doing when I'm doing my focus work, I'll probably be slightly more focused when I'm remote because I do not have distraction. My colleague is actually trying to open a crisp packet and I'm distracted, or there is some coffee discussion going on next to me. So I can be more focused when I'm at home. And on average, what we have learned from our teams is that is how it looks like. So the direct focus work becomes less time consuming. However, the direct productive work where I have to interact with people increases. The coffee conversation which I could have, or the meeting which I could have, or discussion which I could have in 5-10 minutes, I actually will book a half an hour slot now. So every single time I have to have that interaction, I'm looking at half an hour, 1 hour windows, and all our calendars get really booked up with all those meetings. Indirect work contribution, yes, we would still have informal communication. I'll pick up the phone, call Eckhard, we can still have the discussion, or we do these video calls regularly, which has become the norm. So there will be the virtual interaction. Will I spend similar amount of time? Most likely, it might go up and down. Will there be social interaction outside work? Yes, we have seen, virtual wine sessions. We have had virtual pub quiz. We had a team building activity all done virtually. There was even a cooking session virtually done. So yes, there are different activities which can still happen in the virtual world. But if you look at the comparison, your overall hours you spend in different activities related to work actually do not change. So when you're thinking about, planning a remotely run project, you have to go with the assumption that the actual working hours or the hours spent on work-related activities do not really change. You actually need, in some cases, more time because you're interacting more or you're spending more time in those interactions. So overall, the picture looks quite similar when it comes to comparison of these two activities. Now, what does it mean when if I am working remotely? If I have to think of it as an individual, what are the different implications or what are the different behavioral aspects I should be thinking of when I look at, remote working? How can I make it a success? So there are few aspects. We have divided it into three categories, your work related, your work success, your career, your well-being. So the key here is if I'm remote and I'm not seen, I want to be seen and I also want to interact with people. So communicate, we have to build that trust. How do we build that? By interaction, by actually, picking up the phone or setting up that time. Yes, the interaction time goes up, but we have to do that. And we have been doing that. So, we have to take in more time to understand each other. Like when I joined actually Tenthpin, I was in the UK and most of my team is Germany, Switzerland, US. So how do I get to know each other till the time we actually get to meet? So yes, we would have an interactive session. So I actually ended up scheduling meetings with everybody, trying to understand, how they work, how they deal with day-to-day activities, how things work in Tenthpin. What can I do? How can I get into that? How can I understand the organization culture? But then I have to make that effort, and that goes beyond saying that everybody should be doing that. As I mentioned previously, socialize. There have been so many activities which have which you can do virtually. Yes, the human interaction is always different, but virtually we can do. My son has participated in video calls, for the fun part, with all his dinosaurs and everything, which was quite entertaining for everybody except for me. But it is valuable time which we spend because people get to know me more than what I am in office, in meetings, and so on. You have to, when you are in a remote situation, you have to make sure that you define your objectives clearly. You stay connected informally as well, and you take feedback, you give feedback, you take feedback, because you have to make that extra effort. You are not walking around and you're not able to actually just catch up and say, how do you feel about this? You have to actually make an effort to either, pick up the phone, send a WhatsApp message, even an Instagram message, whatever it is, however you work with your colleagues. There could be numerous ways, or set up a team session and actually have that discussion. Then when it comes to remote working, you have to actually look after your well-being. Health comes first. So, you have to have a point where you say, this is when my work life, is done, and my personal life starts. I think most of us have had challenges when we work remotely. We just work, numerous hours. How do you actually make sure that your family is not then stop suffering? So you need to be very, very proactive about it, and you need to make sure that you maintain regular hours. You have some time in your diary which you spend with your family. I always do dinner with my son, no matter what. Even if there is a call going on, he'll sit with me, and that dinner time is dinner time. So because that is the time, and he knows that mommy will be there when dinner time is happening. At the same time, take breaks. It's really needed. We can't be sitting on the at the same place while working. We need to walk around. It's difficult when you have a lot of Lego around it, but we need to do that. You need to, exercise. I mean, I am probably Eckerd is a much better example in that case. I am less, but I have been trying to actually do a lot of exercise on a regular basis, and I will get better on that. You have to actually look at meeting new people. When you are working remotely, your office is a confined space, so you need to actually have more interaction. You need to, call up friends, go out, meet. Yes, current situation probably doesn't help in all this, but yes, it is going to get better. We're talking about projects which will be beyond the situation, and obviously enjoy the benefits of the flexibility. I mean, I can actually sit here and work while my son's books and toys are all over the place without worrying to actually sort it out, which is which is luxury for me. So yes, take advantage of that. That is actually, and there was a picture Eckert shared where a lady was in the pool. I mean, for somebody it might be a reality, not for us probably, but somebody might actually be working like that. So take advantage of that. Now, how does it look? I mean, we spoke about individuals. How would that same thing look like when you are managing a team virtually? What would a manager has to do in order to make sure that your team is successful? As I just mentioned, there is a difference in perception of working hours versus the reality of working hours. In some cases, those hours actually increase compared to what you spend in your office. If unless you are actually quite strict about your routine, you might end up working much longer hours. So from a project manager perspective, you need to think of how you plan, how you plan your project in such a way that you are not exhausting your team. You are taking care of all these dynamics, all these dimensions. There will be more interaction. There will be time for making sure that people kind of switch off and spend time with their family. There will be more remote conversations. There will be more communication from that aspect, and that has to be taken care of. What would help is defining clear responsibilities, defining clear roles, so a person is clear on what is their actual deliverable, what they're working on. They will have less room to actually come to your desk and ask, is this correct? Because they'll have to set up some time or make an effort to make the call. So more clarity would actually help. In some cases, we have seen people actually, have integration managers or virtualization experts. There are teams which kind of nominate a neutral health and well-being coordinator when you have large teams working remotely, so that somebody neutrally actually speaks on a regular basis to understand people are being taken care of, their career needs, their personal needs are taken care of. So think about it. That could be a very good option to implement within your team, wherein you kind of take care of the social well-being of your team. Communicate, as we say. It's very important. You have to encourage informal conversation. You have to have platforms. I mean, actually, we are quite lucky. We are in an age where most of us have high speed internet. Most of us have access to tools like like Zoom or Teams, where we can actually have a virtual session. But can we actually have a virtual lunch with that? Yes, it's a very common concept right now where people actually have a virtual lunch, and it is quite entertaining. I mean, we see a lot of nice coffee mugs, which is also quite interesting. But you have to encourage those dialogues. That informal lunch actually helps you understand your colleagues much better. Do have dedicated informal conversations, pick up the phone. We have a virtual team right now. I have a huge team currently on a project, 15 people. How do I make sure that their well-being is taken care of? So what I actually do is I have virtual coffee sessions with them. I mean, we will talk about anything under the sun. We have spoken about schools, we have spoken about admissions, we've spoken about toys, Legos, TV series, you name it. The idea is to actually, understand each other, have that conversation. So as a manager, please go ahead, pick up the phone, have those conversations. There could be different channels. You can have a WhatsApp group, share some jokes, keep the atmosphere light. It's up to your culture, up to your way of working, but you should have a channel like that. And lead by example. Be there when a person needs it. There could be a lot of things where people might not open up. It's very much visible when the person is around. You can see that probably something is wrong with somebody. They'll have to actually make an effort to speak up. So you need to be that trusted partner for your team, where they can actually reach out to you, discuss things which probably are impacting their work or impacting their life. Just be there. There should be a culture of transparency. There should be more about sharing, more about caring, and obviously there could be risk, but you need to plan around that. So the message is, make sure as a manager you are there. As an employee, you reach out wherever there is a challenge. Some introvert person might think, okay, this is quite tricky, but then you have to make it slightly more formal. If you're uncomfortable, find channels. I actually went ahead and actually invited people, my colleagues, on my social media channels, so that they get to know me better. They probably will open up more to me, especially those who I understand are more introverts. That gives them an option to know me better, and once they know me, they will probably start to open up. So with that, I hand it off back to you, Eckhart, to move to the next section.
Thank you. We also had a question meanwhile. So the question was if we have to extend the project timeline when a project is 100% virtual. I think it's a good question, and I would like to pause it actually for the moment till the end. I hope I remember it at the end, but I think let's go through it. It's a good question, but it depends a bit on some factors. That's why I would like to park that.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Over to tools, and I want to be a good citizen and draw something here. So obviously tools are not the answer to all challenges, but they are a great help. I think that's a fair summary, and they have really developed a lot in the past. And we try to make that a bit systematic. So we have here like a couple of dimensions, and then we have like the past, how was it like 1, 5, 10 years ago, and what capabilities do we have today? So if we look here at project management and execution, I think that was normally the PMO was chasing centrally the tasks and the activities, which is now with tools far more real-time and collaborative. So basically all project members can access status, can update it real-time in a tool. And this real-time and collaborative, I think that is also when working on deliverables. I think one great example is when you work on PowerPoint or Excel on SharePoint. So you can work with whatever, 10 people. I mean, maybe that's not so sufficient with 2 or 3 people in parallel on a PowerPoint. And I think it works very well. And I think for me, I do it every day, but I still think it's a bit of magic. I think it's a really step forward that helps so much that people can work in parallel, and that you can also see what other people have done in parallel. So that's a great tool. Then in terms of collaboration and communication, maybe 5-10 years ago, obviously there were emails and conference calls and everything. I think now they are far more integrated into one tool, so that you can basically, like in Teams, you can directly jump from your calendar into the call and vice versa. So I think the integration here is a key aspect. The biggest step forward we've seen in this green part here in the middle, that is social interaction and relationship building. I think like 10 years ago, I think that wasn't even on the radar of any software companies that they are producing these tools. So what used to be the coffee corner is now things like social channels, Teams, Slack, and we will have a few examples of that moving forward. But that's definitely the area that has improved most, and that really adds value to running projects remotely. And then also one aspect I find interesting, and maybe that's a bit overlooked, but also evaluation and feedback management, which used to be like a meeting where you sit down and have a piece of paper and then you go tick the box. Have you done that? Have you fulfilled your objectives? I think it's far more real time. So you probably you've seen on LinkedIn, you can praise the work, you can do the same on Teams. So there's this functionality to give immediate feedback and also to encourage to give immediate feedback. That's now built into these tools. And finally, security and access. I think it was very aggravating in the past. And I always felt as a consultant, and sorry for the clients, I always felt a bit outside. I felt that there were extra measures for the outsiders working remotely. So I like my VPN connection timed out every half an hour. I had to enter complicated way my password. I think that has become much better with multi-factor, single sign-on, with mobile phone, just screening your face and then you have access. I think that also has giving much more user-friendly recently. Now I'd like to jump into 2 examples to show you how that works. Obviously, your expectation shouldn't be that we make the evaluation on tools. I think there are too many on the market. And in principle, these tools are, I think the software providers, they are catching up. I think they are copying each other. So if there's something out in the market, I think that's pretty quickly distributed. What you can see is that you sometimes need to make a choice. For example, if you have like Teams, probably it's more integrated, where if you want to do calls with Teams, it's more integrated. If you want to do calls with Zoom, I think it's better to manage workshops, for example. One example here is Kahoot, and it's not related to that picture on the right-hand side. So what is Kahoot? Maybe you've heard about it. It's similar to Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. So you can predefine questions, and you can define questions and have predefined answers. Normally 4, but I think it can also be 2. So you can, for example, ask what is the average age of the project team, and then you can have like whatever 40, 20, 30, or 60, and then people can play that. And the fun is, I think it's two-sided. One is that it allows people to do a fun activity, which is clear, but the charm of this Kahoot is actually that you're free to build the questions. So you can build questions around the project team. So for example, the average age of the project team, or you can ask about locations of the company, what are the objectives, what's their product. So you can build a connect between the game and the real project situation. That's kind of the personalization of that game. That's what I like about Kahoot when we played that. Obviously, I also have to be a bit careful. So I had a situation where someone prepared the question, and then there was like, who's the oldest project member on the project, which was a bit difficult. So we cut that out, but I think it shows you the opportunity and the power that you have with these tools. And then another one is tools for workshop management. Again, they are different tools outside in the market, like Teams, Zooms, or Google Meet. I think the features are roughly the same. So the great thing is that you can have separate rooms and breakouts, which is a great advantage. You have moderator capabilities, so I can mute you all, I can switch you on and off, I can receive questions, I can answer those questions here or written. So that are great capabilities that are offered. And we've seen it here, there are these instant polls, so that actually also spices up a bit the presentation if you have a formal interaction. And what's also great, I think, is this whiteboard functionality, which you see here on the right-hand side, that enables you to run workshops in a much better quality compared to just the PowerPoint presentations.
Eka, there was a question on the same thing. What are the tools available in the market which kind of replace the whiteboard, the traditional whiteboard? I'm guessing that we have just answered that question with the previous slide. We will elaborate a little bit more here.
Yeah, I think there are different add-ons like Mural, for example, for Zoom that you can use. So there are various. We didn't elaborate here the entire market, so we don't make a tool comparison. As I said earlier, I think they are catching up pretty quickly. So they are copying each other. So if there's some functionality missing in the ecosystem of Microsoft, I think, and it's in Google, I think they will pretty much copy it in the next version. I think that's what we've seen in the market. Maybe we can already start the next poll.
Yep.
While I drive you through the synopsis. So when you look at the different project phases, from prepare to go live and hypercare, you see different challenges, and a couple of them we've listed here. For example, you have the sprint and stand-up meetings in the build phase, for which you may want to use Jira. You have virtual classrooms in the testing and training phase. In the go live phase, you may want to use mobile phones. So I think they are a couple of tools that help you to get through the specific challenges of an individual project phase. And that's what we've highlighted here. Again, in relation to the earlier question, it's not a real comparison, so to say. I think we are just listing them by purpose to give you a little bit of an overview.
Let's end, then share the results. Oh.
Is that
Microsoft
really a surprise
Teams.
that Microsoft Teams is the most used video conferencing system?
No, I don't think so. Zoom is also there. I mean, yeah, I think this was expected. I would like to know what other tools people are using. Okay. Again, Microsoft Team, right? The instant communication platform, also Microsoft Team. Apparently, that's the most used tool. Slack is also there. And most people think they only use 50% capacity or the 50% functionality of these tools.
Yeah, I would agree to that. I mean, in the preparation of this webinar, I've actually learned quite something from my colleagues, and vice versa. Hopefully, I think it's that everybody has some knowledge, and I think most people don't systematically go to a training for such a tool. They just start using it, and then it grows from experience, right?
Yeah, there was a question occurred about Google Hangouts. That has it turned into Google Meet? The answer is yes, guys, it has. That's the new tool from Google. It has some very interesting features. It has also introduced a noise cancellation feature. So your child might be shouting in the background and you can actually attend a work call. So hopefully that answers your question.
To come back to the big picture, we looked at the behavioral aspects, what you as an individual or a project manager can do to improve virtual projects, virtual communication. We then looked into a few tools just to give you an impression of the dimensions that have improved and how you can work with. Now we would like to apply that a bit with specific project situation. And I think they are, let's say, symptomatic for the situation. So let's start with the first. I think if you tell people we can run a project 100% remotely, maybe the first reaction is, I don't believe it. For example, do a team building event. How do you actually do that? And I think it's clear that in a on-site environment, you have the famous bowling and we all go dinner and have a drink. It's really easy to organize. I think you put one person on it and maybe it's, I don't know, half a day and things are done. I hope I'm not unfair with the person normally organizing that. But it's a one-time event, you tick it off in the project plan and then things are done. And a lot of things of team building are actually happening and you don't really realize them, right? They happen while people are working together, sitting together, going for lunch and so on. So now in the virtualized environment, yeah, I think it's a continuous process. That's why we have this circle here. And the individual event might be of relatively low effort. Maybe it's a little less than the dinner and bowling, but the total number of effort you need to put into that is significantly higher. That's my experience. So that's why we start with the planning. So you really have to have a plan, almost like a communication plan. You have to have a team building plan on a project when you run that. And an example could be when people join the project, there's a welcome mail with a picture and some details, right? So that people are aware people are joining. Then what we've used on another project, very successful, is that we had an Instagram account, and on every day, then there was a birthday of one of the team members, we published a picture so that people were aware. And I think that was very much appreciated and people really liked it because it opened conversation. When you had that person on the call, you could directly connect. So I think that was a good tool. Then when you're organizing this, you may want to do a Kahoot challenge that we just addressed. But it also works without technology. I think you can also, and that's this example of the camera, you can do something which we called at the project picture of the day. So project members, they share a picture that means something to them and tell a little story. Or you share the picture and you have to find to which person it relates, so that you can also do that as a little quiz. But I think this is also at relatively low cost. Without a tool, you can easily do that. And then the team symbol I added here because obviously it's also team building is also like in this seminar, we not just shared our business picture, Peter and I, with whatever suit and skirt, but we actually try to share like our personal picture, like Peter on the couch and me on the bicycle. So that also opens the door a bit and enables communication. And that's a continuous process where you actually should lead as an example when you're a project manager and even if you're a project member. So takeaway, it's a continuous process. I think it takes more time and it needs to be carefully planned. Then another challenge, what people brought up when we discussed if projects can be run 100% remotely is the workshop. So you have a complicated transformation project and you need to run workshops, and that is obviously not that easy. So to start from the left-hand side, from let's say the easier one, from the smaller workshops, I think the first learning is that when you run a project, when you manage a project, I think if you do it on site, you may be able to take some shortcuts sometimes. So maybe you come unprepared in a workshop and improvise, or you don't send minutes sometimes. Maybe you get away, but the real learning that I have is in a virtualized environment, you need to be 100%. So you really need to prepare it. You have to have a lead. You have to send pre-reading. You have to use the video. Everybody has to use the video. So you really have to be on the ball and 100% that you do a good job in managing that. Otherwise, it's very risky and it will fail. Then for bigger workshops, I think it's that you should use the whiteboard that we just discussed. You may want to split the group into smaller groups. You may want to use polls. And you also, like we do it here, you will as a moderator maybe mute everybody. Otherwise it won't work if you have a bigger number of participants. And then I think from a project planning perspective, the most important thing is that when you go into bigger workshops, break them down. So if you have done a workshop planning for an on-site environment and you have 10 workshops of 4 hours, My experience is you have to split that maybe in a little shorter, but you have to split that maybe into 30 workshops, which in overall duration are longer. So if you have a workshop, an alignment of regions, maybe do the alignment of EMEA in one, of Asia in one, and US in the third one, and then bring them together in one workshop. Otherwise, from my experience, it won't work, or it's very difficult. And I think it's well invested time. It will be overall longer, but from my experience, it will pay out, and that's the advantage. So that were two examples. Having said that, I hand over back to Arpita, discussing some other aspects.
Yep. So, I think this was also a question about some of the policies. Let's talk about some of the other aspects you need to take care of when you are actually planning to do a global transformation project virtually. So there is a security aspect. You need to make sure, you have the right user-friendly IT infrastructure available for your team. There are data privacy and information policies in place. There should be no public Wi-Fi. You should have encrypted sensitive information. Yes, clean desk policy is more of an office thing, but it actually is very much applicable in the virtual world as well. You are living with your family. There is sensitive information which you sometimes access. And ideally, you should follow the same in your home office when you are working there. Obviously, password security is a no-brainer here. We all follow that, but we forget as well. So we need to make sure that we apply the right security principles. From a legal perspective, we did discuss about long hours. I have heard this thing from some of the team members. I don't know when to take the break. I just keep working. I don't know how to switch off because I just keep working. Yes, that is personality driven as well. But at the same time, you need to encourage people to actually switch off at some point for their own health well-being. It's important. So you need to have some kind of a tracking mechanism to actually get visibility of, overtime, working hours, make sure that there is some kind of compliance in place so that, people are, you have a good view of how things are being done. You need to also make sure that there is a safe work environment, and you satisfy from a legal perspective all the work environment obligations, any data security concerns, and so on. From a health and safety perspective, obviously, it's it's important. It's very important. I mentioned that it's difficult with all the Lego pieces, but I need to make sure that I actually take care of the health and safety aspects. So I do clear my place. I mean, there would be toys lying around, but that doesn't mean that I am actually, not taking care of the basic health and safety aspects. Along with that, we need to make sure there is comfortable equipment. I mean, I have a nice chair, thankfully, but we need to make sure that all the team members actually have access to the right equipment. There is mental well-being which is taken care of. You are there. We discuss about this. There is a question, and let me just answer that question about communication channel. When it is right to actually send an email versus when do you actually pick up the phone. I think it depends culturally. I think it depends on personality, and when I say personality, it's both ends. You would know better how the other side, other person would react. I mean, if I look at Eckhart, for example, I would rather prefer sending him a message than picking up the phone and calling him because I know I'll be able to reach him much quicker. On the other hand, I'm probably much better at picking up my phone. So we both are different at the same. So Eckhart would actually call me rather than send me a message, which he also understands. So I think with time you understand what works well with your colleagues. If you're really new to the company, I would say go be proactive, ask what they would prefer. People are very, very clear about what they would prefer. I always say send me a text message, at least I'll see it. I'm not very good with all the other channels. Make sure when you have team members, especially those who are living alone, and working alone, are taken care of. They know that they can reach somebody, especially when there is an emergency. There is a mechanism in place where you can actually take care of any emergency situations. And with that, We move.
One question on company policies, which I think also fits in here. I think, and I think it's more a remark, but I think it's correct to say that maybe companies also have to rethink the policies, what kind of equipment they provide, and if maybe they even have to support working at home. I mean, they save the costs of the offices, and I think you've heard that maybe from Facebook, that Facebook is actually they went public and said that they will give them actually more money, like an allowance to support them working from home. So I think that's also an aspect of this slide.
There is another question on the same aspect about should employer pay for workstation setup. I think it depends on company policies. Some are actually doing that. Facebook, as Eckhart mentioned, even Google, Amazon went ahead with that note. Some are going it based on the health and safety requirements of the individual. So there are different views around it. Ideally, there should be, I mean, from a company perspective, they should be looking at, the well-being of their employees. So most companies, I feel, are actually taking that step. With that, we move to the next section, which is more about
question around culture. So how, I mean, maybe you elaborate that here a little bit on how different company cultures influence the virtualization project.
Yep, I will. So basically, I think there are certain influencing factors which you need to be aware of. You need to take care of when you're planning a virtual project. Complexity, you need to understand how complex it would be. And when it comes to complexity, it's not just the project complexity, but it's also people complexity. You need to understand, you would know your organization better. So you need to see, where the complexity would sit, both from people and from process perspectives. And that has to be taken care of when you're doing the planning. If it requires, the project to have additional buffer, then that is probably the right way to go. Then there are physical requirements. There are certain situations where you need to be physically present. You have a factory, you want to train the people there. So you want somebody to actually go there and help them. Can it be done remotely? Theoretically, yes, it can be done remotely. Will that work? And you might want to say, that is the part which I would actually not do virtually. It's up to your culture and it's up to the situation. But those are certain things which you need to think about. Culture again. So there, culture is an interesting one. You need to understand your own company culture, and it varies. I have seen that changing as well. If you look at Google, they actually always went with the idea of having employees in office. Now the situation has totally changed. They are actually encouraging as a company culture for their own employees to work remotely, to actually take remote working as an option. So there has been a huge cultural shift from the company itself. So I think from if you look around you, you will see companies are actually taking proactive measures and trying to address the cultural side of things. Having said that, there are companies who still want to, who still prefer having more face time and so on. So that has to be taken care of when it comes to, cultural aspects. Technical infrastructure, we are in the age where we all have access to high speed internet. But we do have those dark spots where the internet would not work. There are still locations which struggle with the download speeds, which struggle with internet speeds. And if you have a project which requires those, which require people in those geographical areas to be active, you need to think about how you would navigate through that. Do you want to set up a small hub where, or you need to actually look at internet speed, how you can actually increase that? You need to think of all those things. Obviously, you have to take into account any kind of power failure in certain regions which are prominent. If that is the case, you need to make sure you have planned for it. Obviously, project phases, there are certain phases where you need more hand-holding versus some which are, traditionally always a candidate for a virtual setup. So when you talk about phases which require more hand-holding, you need to think of more creative ways, as Eckhart has already discussed. There are so many tools at our disposal. We can run a design workshop virtually. We can do a training session virtually. We can do so much, but you need to think about those and plan. If the culture doesn't allow, if your project doesn't allow, then you might have to think of, doing it in person eventually. But there are definitely options to do it virtually. Eka, do you want to add anything to this?
No. Looking at the
Okay.
time, I keep it short.
Yes, I think with that, we are near the end of our webinar. So Eckhard, over to you.
Yeah, closure. Maybe for the closure, I address one question that is still open. So the question is, if I do a project 100% remotely, will that extend the time and the effort required? And unfortunately, I don't have a yes or no answer. I think in best case, it's even quicker. And that might be a project maybe where you have very focused work, and that's great. Maybe there's where it levels out, where you need longer, but actually you save the travel and commute. But it could also be that those projects actually take significantly longer. So, and then there could be a business case where you say, if I spend 10% of my fee budget on travel and expense, I can do the project 20% quicker. And then actually you have a business case, and that actually would allow them, or that would encourage people to travel, because it's actually, there's a business case and it's more effective. And I think that is very difficult to address and to calculate. I think that depends on experience, on the cultural situation, all those factors that Arpita just has described. And I think that's a bit also my conclusion of this webinar, to put it in a nutshell.
Well, yeah, I think we, if you do have any additional questions, we have our contact details here. We also, you can go to tenthpin.com. That's our website. You will have an option to actually get in touch with us. So anything, I mean, you have me, Arpita, Eckhard here. Please reach out. These are our contact details. Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks a lot, everybody, for joining.
Yep. Thank you. Take care. Stay safe. Stay healthy.
Bye-bye. Ciao.
Bye-bye.